So a video came out a while ago by the YouTuber SK calling Spectacular Spider-Man an overhyped disaster, which I definitely disagree with, but I never bothered to watch it fully because, well, it's 2 hours long. But after Colin's debunking of SK's video on why Spider-Man PS4 is bad, I felt I had to return to watch this video to see if the critiques were as petty or if it was actually as bad as the Spider-Man PS4 video. And oh my god, it might actually be worse. There are a few good points here which I will mention, but I wish I was joking when I say about 85 to 90% of the video are just nitpicks. Specifically nitpicks of the action sequences, which is just so sad. You have to remember that a cartoon is very different to any other form of media in what they are even allowed to do, and also the expectation is much lower than, for example, the movies, since, well, obviously the target audience is of a much younger age that would have lower expectations. They aren't really trying to dissect each action sequence to find if there is something wrong, they're just trying to have fun. So I really disagree with how much of an emphasis he puts on criticizing the action sequences, since they're pretty subjective. The goal of any action sequence to me is to entertain the viewer in any way it can. If it does that, then I believe the action sequence achieves its goal, even at the expense of realism, to a degree. Clearly, SK views it differently, that the amount of realism in an action sequence is what makes it good, which is okay, that's fine, but it's just your opinion, and you can't extend that to the entire show and say that the entire show is bad because you disagree with parts of the action. Let's just get into episode 1 and you'll see what I mean.
So for at least an entire summer, Spider-Man has been openly swinging around and fighting crime without attempting to make his existence unknown or hidden to any capacity. He even remarks on catching Flint and Alex for the third time this summer, both of which have been working for the big man, also known as Tombstone.
Oh no, not again!
What is this, Markle, like the third time this summer?
Spider-Man's existence should be painfully obvious by now, especially for someone like Tombstone, who would keep tabs on how the city is operating to make sure his criminal organization can run smoothly. But this episode tells us that Tombstone only got confirmation of his existence the first time we see Spider-Man on screen.
So it's important to remember that New York is a very big city, and also that this show was made in 2008. Not everybody was walking around with an iPhone 14 Pro Max sitting in their pocket. News of his existence wouldn't have spread near as quickly as it would now, and even if it did, a lot of people may just believe he isn't real, which makes sense. And likely this is what Tombstone thought before getting video proof as confirmation.
Last night, we had confirmation. The Spider-Man is real.
Vulture even refers to him as a myth in this episode. Not a great start to the video, but let's move on.
Fortunately, Vulture is an absolutely terrible villain. To break down his character real quick, he came to Oscorp with ideas for flight tech, and had his ideas rejected. He learns they rejected his ideas as a means of copying them down, and finding a way to steal his work without giving Adrian a way to prove it.
He studied my ideas and rejected them. Then announces Oscorp Tech Flight 4 months later. Osborn, you stole my work!
That's dangerous talk, Mr. Toombs. If you never accomplished anything as a young man, who'd believe you created Tech Flight as an old one?
This drives Adrian to suit up as the Vulture and attempt to threaten Norman into giving him the credit he deserves, paying him compensation, and publicly apologizing for stealing his work. And while this works in concept, it doesn't in execution. Vulture's big brain plan is to wear a flight suit that doesn't have a mask to conceal his identity, and use the suit to grab Norman, fly him around, and ask him to give him everything he believes he is owed. Firstly, your life is over once Norman is let go. Your face is exposed, Norman knows your name, and the police would be able to link your identity to your face. So even if Norman does everything you ask him to, you won't be able to enjoy all that because you'll be too busy stuck in prison.
Yeah, Vulture's plan isn't supposed to be good, that's what they intended. The decision to suit up as Vulture is pretty much a spur-of-the-moment decision. He did it more so out of rage than anything else. It's reasonable how unreasonable he is. To put yourself in his shoes, he's been working his whole life, trying and failing to make a successful invention. And the moment he finally creates something great, it gets stolen from him, and there's nothing he can do. It's kinda sad actually. And by the way, if you really don't like Vulture here, then you must really hate Harvey Dent from The Dark Knight, because a lot of your criticisms would also apply there. Both Vulture and Harvey Dent have gone insane, that's the point.
Vulture attempts this plan while Peter is hanging out with Harry, which brings Peter's attention to the attack. Peter tells Harry to call the cops and removes his shoes on the balcony, then leaves them there only to jump off. Wait a minute, why leave a trace of your own belongings behind after jumping off that building and finding a place to change into your Spider-Man uniform?
Yeah, I'll give you that one. It's mostly to set up Peter returning to Norman's house to pick up his shoes later on, but they could have found a better reason.
Now, it's important to consider that Vulture's ability to fly is far quicker than Spider-Man's ability to swing. Yet while Spider-Man is carrying Norman, somehow he is traveling faster than Vulture at points.
What are you talking about? Spider-Man is constantly shown to be faster than Vulture. He catches up to him so many times. In the one clip you showed, Vulture does go faster than Spider-Man, for like a second, but Spidey clearly isn't going at his max speed and stops on a wall. Nice try though.
Peter is now actively trying to find a job to help his Aunt May pay the bills. He gets the idea to take photos of Spider-Man and cash them in. So soon afterwards, he decided it was a good idea to climb up the side of the Daily Bugle, out in the open, where anybody could see him, with no suit or mask to conceal his identity.
Kind of defeats the whole anonymous superhero thing.
Again, this show was made in 2008. The most anyone would see if they randomly decided to look up at the perfect moment would be like his bare outline. No one would even be able to discern who he is. However, yes, it doesn't excuse that Peter is being a little risky with this. But you have to remember, he's been Spider-Man for only 3 months and is 16 years old. He can make bad decisions sometimes. It's not bad storytelling.
Later in the day, Spider-Man goes looking for his shoes back at Osborn's home. He does this at the same time Norman happens to be arriving at his home from his car, which allows him to cross paths with the Vulture again. Also, if Vulture knew that Osborn was inside the car and followed it around the city, why didn't he just start by cutting the car open if he was willing to do so, like he does later on? Also, why did Vulture announce his presence to Osborn instead of just quickly flying in to grab him, which gives him the littlest chance of being able to react in time?
All clear?
Osborn!
Go, go!
Also, why didn't you wait until Norman was further away from his car before flying over to grab him so Norman can't just go back to his car so quickly? Also, how the fuck do you expect your same plan from earlier to work this time around? You still didn't think it through and realize how counterproductive it is? Don't you realize that Norman already would have told the police who you are and what you're trying to do? Yet you repeat this same stupid plan again? This guy is way dumber than Vulture in Homecoming. Holy shit.
Okay, a lot to unpack here. First off, do you really think that Vulture was following Osborn around the city? He obviously just waited for him to arrive at his literal house and surprise attacked him. Also, I get where you're coming from with both Vulture shouting Osborn's name and not letting him move a distance away from the car, but to me it just clearly shows how insane he's gotten. He isn't even rationalizing his own attacks. If you think this is a negative, that's fine, but no, it's just not a very strong one. Also, how else do you expect Vulture to attack Osborn? Surprise attacks are like all he can do, and he would have gotten away with it the first time if it wasn't for Spider-Man, so he's just trying it again. Probably the least insane thing he's done so far. Also, you're nitpicking and looking way too deeply into a 6-second scene.
Vulture, just cut off Spider-Man's web. You've done it before. What the hell are you doing right now? Cut it. Cut it. Cut it. Cut it. Cut it. Cut it. Cut it.
It doesn't even take that long to work this out if you really care that much. So if Vulture were to try and cut Spider-Man's web, he would have to turn around in his suit. In the process of doing that, it would turn Spider-Man around also, leaving him in the same situation he was in before. It is quite literally impossible for the Vulture to cut Spider-Man's web in this situation. And here I was thinking you cared about realism.
Enforcers are also here to take the opportunity to attack Spider-Man while he is distracted by the Vulture. They start by shooting a net to restrain him, which I think is a fine plan so far. But then, instead of just shooting at Spider-Man with the helicopter while Spider-Man is restrained, their plan is to send Ox and Fancy Dan to take on Spider-Man, someone with super strength, super agility, and yes, super durability in hand-to-hand combat. Just shoot him, you morons!
As I said before, Spider-Man's only been around for about 3 months, so it's understandable to expect them not to know he is at least super strength and super durability at this point. And clearly they aren't trying to kill him at all. And I know that does contradict them talking about squashing him earlier, and that is definitely an oversight on behalf of the writers, because usually squashing means killing. Sadly, you don't talk about that inconsistency though.
Okay, what the fuck is this weapon? Is this meant to be a blade? Because this looks more like a shovel to me. Do you really think you can kill him with that?
Yeah, again, this just kind of proves that they definitely aren't trying to kill him.
Why the fuck would Ox jump off the building to chase after Spider-Man?
Yeah, that's kinda dumb. I'd like to think that he has some sort of built-in parachute, but whatever.
Vulture takes advantage of this distraction and catches up to Norman's car. He cuts open the middle area. Wait, hold the fuck up. He could have used the wing blades to stab the tires, which would heavily slow it down, or why not cut open a door to the driver's seat so he can either force the driver to stop the car while having his wing blade up to his neck, or just remove the driver and get into the driver's seat to hit the brakes? Why did you make this so needlessly complicated?
I'm not sure why you think Vulture stopping the car in a busy street would be so beneficial to him. If anything, it would just create a bigger disruption and alert Spider-Man to where he is. Also, what do you mean by he made this needlessly complicated? He took the most obvious and direct way to attack Norman. If anything, your method would have been the most needlessly complicated.
I don't understand. Spider-Man doesn't kill people.
Okay, Spider-Man just intentionally clipped part of Vulture's wings and clashed it against the helicopter. His plan was to disable Vulture's flight tech in a way that also disables Montana's helicopter, which would result in it falling and crashing. He also didn't know Vulture could remain airborne due to being surprised when he comments on it.
My wing! I can't steer!
Yeah, but you're still airborne. How does that work exactly?
So he believed Vulture would have just fallen, so either he leaves the helicopter to fall to save Vulture, or he leaves Vulture to fall to save the helicopter. Either way, he is going against his no-kill rule, or he is risking civilian casualties due to a helicopter crash, and breaking his no-kill rule anyway, since this could get Montana killed. It's character assassination whichever way you want to put it. Oh, but Spider-Man knew Vulture would stay airborne, so it's okay for him to clip his wings like that. Then why does he stay on Vulture's back and do nothing about the helicopter crash? This helicopter can land anywhere. Why is he dicking around making jokes and not even attempting to stop it? Even when he finds out that Vulture is still airborne, he is not shown to be concerned about the helicopter while it is falling, and he has a laugh after actually destroying Vulture's ability to remain airborne. Even after committing to this action and learning Vulture can remain airborne, he made the worst decision possible by letting the helicopter fall and forcing him into a position where Vulture is also falling down and needs saving. This scene is blatant character assassination. Oh, now you check on the helicopter. Fucking lucky for you this didn't land near a bunch of innocents, you piece of shit.
If you look at the clip, you can see when Spider-Man is on the back of Vulture, he is looking in the direction of the helicopter as it's falling. We can't see it, but Spider-Man definitely can. He must have seen the guy parachute out of the helicopter. Yes, this is quite reckless of Spider-Man. Again, he is 16, and I know I am slightly stretching, but I also think it's slightly stretching to say that this is character assassination. With that logic, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man throwing those civilians on the train scene is character assassination, because, well, he could have missed the web. My god, that wasn't good. Notice how he fails to mention any scene in the school, or really anything to do with Peter Parker, you know, half the character. This episode does a really good job introducing characters, and they're dynamic with other characters, like Norman seeing more in Peter than in his own son.
At ESU, working with Kurt Connors.
Connors, huh? Quite an opportunity. Don't suppose you were considered for the honor, Harry?
No, sir.
It's totally not a big deal, Mr. O, but thanks. We'll get out of your way now.
Osborn!
I'm guessing this is because it's a lot harder to come up with critiques of characters, the writing, the narrative, that kind of thing, over just staring at the action scenes designed to entertain kids. You may notice the similarities between this reviewing style and CinemaSins. If you don't know, CinemaSins is basically a YouTube channel derived of basically nitpicking movies to find issues with. Very similar to SK. However, the thing about CinemaSins is that they are very satirical in nature. They know well that these aren't really proper critiques, for the most part. I mean, they literally found 134 problems with The Dark Knight. It just shows how easy it is. And that's on The Dark Knight, a movie some people consider to be flawless. Just imagine how easy it is to do in a cartoon made for Fox Kids. I won't go into as much details in the next episodes because I would just be repeating myself. And I would say I'll just ignore the nitpicks and address the main points. But I forget that nitpicks make up about 80% of the video, so I guess I have no choice.
Episode 2 opens up with Kurt experimenting on genetically altered eels. Max Dillon is tasked with upgrading the lab's bioelectric filters. Let me just play the clip of how this escalates into him becoming Electro. Is this a joke? Max's tool happened to be placed somewhere it would have fallen easily right onto the control panel, and despite Max seeing it out of control and electricity sparking, he willingly touches it, gets blasted back, sticks to the side of the container, and breaks the glass open, and he gets electro powers. What in the fuck is this stupid-ass origin? This is dumber than how Max becomes Electro in The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Are you really criticizing Electro's origin for making no sense? Is that where we're at right now? Alright, you know what? Go ahead. Give me a reasonable explanation for someone to gain Electro powers. Something SK does a lot that Colin touched on is that he appeals to reality a lot. Like in almost every argument, and it just comes off as really petty when talking about a cartoon. I don't know about you, but it just doesn't look good. Let's just say there's a reason CinemaSins stays away from animated shows, because their videos would be like 2 hours long. Oh wait.
I start to take issue with Peter randomly deciding to pick up a call with Aunt May. Peter just needlessly added a distraction to delay his ability to stop Electro, when as far as Peter knows, Electro can get an innocent civilian hurt or killed with the amount of damage he is causing. His focus should be on taking him down as soon as possible, but instead, he takes his eyes off of Electro to have a phone call with Aunt May. He literally leaves a dangerous villain unattended, not even being watched, so he can have a phone call.
So you don't mention that at the end of the previous episode, Aunt May said she wanted Peter home by 10 on school nights. In this scene, Aunt May is calling Peter because it's getting close to 10 and he isn't on his way back. This is really a situation of whether you prioritize good storytelling or an action scene that doesn't make sense in the first place to make slightly more sense. You already know what I'm picking.
Electro then rushes to Connor's lab to try getting cured. Dude, why the fuck are you smashing the materials Kurt may need in order to cure you? Not only is this counterproductive to his goals, but Kurt is a friend of yours. Do you not trust him to try helping you? He's not even giving Kurt the chance, he's just telling him, cure me now. Let him utilize his materials then. Let him think of a solution. Ignoring the fact Connors is under duress, he would help Max on his own volition. If you want Kurt to cure you so bad, at least give him the chance, you moron.
It isn't explicitly said, but Electro seems to be in a lot of pain or discomfort, which is understandable. Dude literally got turned into a human light bulb. What also is understandable is his reckless behavior. Arguably more so than Vulture. Again, you must hate Two-Face.
Why did you pick up a call with May again? What if Electro screams out your name on call? What if your phone gets fried? What if May gets suspicious about the background noise again? Why the fuck are you wasting time calling May when this creates a needless distraction and delay you when you need to take down a life-threatening villain?
You just don't like fun, is that it? Yeah, sure, this scene is dumb, but it's like a lot of fun. Aunt May calls Peter again, talking about their 10 o'clock arrangement, and he's trying to deal with that while also trying to not get fried by Electro. And there's just something so relatable about the dialogue to me. I don't know what it is.
Oh man, where does the time go?
Hello?
Hi, Aunt May.
Peter, where are you? You sound strange, and there's so much static.
Yeah, it's bad connection. Listen, I'm running late again, but...
Peter, you're taking advantage of our arrangement. Calling in late every night is not acceptable.
Sorry, I can't hear you. Static. I'll be home soon. Bye. I'm so grounded. Of course, being grounded right now might not be such a bad thing.
So yeah, I think the pros outweigh the cons here by a quarter mile. Like, how can you watch this scene and legitimately take issue with it? I don't know, it's just kind of weird to me.
Both of these first two episodes have just been complete messes. This episode is another 2 out of 10.
He tries to say how Electro's actions and motivations are nonsensical, and it's like, yeah, same thing with pretty much every comic book villain ever made. Very, very, very rarely are their actions fully justified. If you want a non-nonsensical reason for Electro to go around New York blasting the place with electricity, you're not gonna get it. This isn't a reality TV show. And again, the Two-Face comparison works here also.
And these two aren't even worse than the next episode.
I think it's a bit disingenuous to just assume he never tested it on anything in any form whatsoever, since the show never explicitly says that. A similar issue arises here that I noticed in the second episode, where you interpret character mistakes as bad writing. I mean, obviously Kurt was being too hasty with the lizard formula, and even his wife acknowledges the dangers to him. But for a villain like Electro or the Lizard to even exist, someone has to screw up, Like, it doesn't just happen when characters are making perfect decisions.
Lizard manages to escape on the train all the way to the Bronx Zoo. Wait a minute. Lizard should be staking out like a sore thumb after running around the city, going to the subway, then entering a train headed for the Bronx Zoo as its next stop. At no point throughout this entire final fight do the police ever show up, when if they did, they would have witnessed the battle and saw Kurt was the one who transformed into the lizard once he gets cured. Isn't that incredibly lucky?
Not really. The lizard is shown to be really fast and is quite human-sized, in terms of he isn't absolutely giant per se. I think it's reasonable to expect at his speed he could escape at night. The police would have been called to the train station, but not the Bronx Zoo, since no one but Eddie would have saw him there. Also, the train was headed towards the Bronx, like the city, not specifically the zoo.
Number 2 Express to the Bronx. Please stand clear of the closing doors.
Remember in a previous video where I brought up the issue in The Amazing Spider-Man and No Way Home, how nearly every time Lizard grabs Spider-Man in place, he doesn't impale him with his claws when all he has to do is bend his fingers as he's grabbing Spider-Man? Spider-Man is being gripped tightly inside the water, and is not being impaled by Lizard's claws somehow. Spider-Man has massive plot armor right here. He should be dead, and Kurt shouldn't be cured. Lucky for Spider-Man, he gets saved by some dumbass alligator distracting Lizard.
Really? Drowning was like the smartest option here. Clearly the lizard is stronger than Spider-Man. He's got a tight grip on him and they are both underwater. There was literally nothing Spider-Man could do there. You actually want him to forfeit his grip in an attempt to stab Spider-Man? That's just stupid.
Spider-Man webs any exit paths. Then, Spider-Man decides on a camera angle to place his camera, as confirmed by this dialogue right here.
Find the perfect spot to bounce Lizard into the drink. Check, check. The perfect angle.
This right here is also blatant character assassination. And here's why. Eddie is sticking his neck out for the mission right here. Spider-Man does not know how far Eddie is, and if Lizard is chasing him at the moment. So instead of wasting time setting up the camera, he should be keeping an eye on Eddie to make sure he can safely bait the Lizard over here without being killed. But instead of checking up on Eddie to make sure he's safe, he just leaves him there to set up his camera so he can get good shots. He just prioritized a good camera angle over his friend's life. And while yes, he is in a financial struggle right now, he would in no way prioritize the photos above his friend's life potentially being taken. It's such an easy decision for Spider-Man, there's no way he'd risk letting his friend die just to get shots of himself. Eddie nearly gets killed by the Lizard because Spider-Man was so far behind, and the reason for that is because he was busy setting up the camera.
Dick move.
Alright, so let's break this down. Peter goes onto the roof of the reptile building when setting up his camera. The same building Eddie was in. By going up there, it allows Peter to instantly know where Eddie was leaving from. And also allows him to get a surprise attack on the Lizard. This isn't character assassination, this is literally just Peter using his head. If he were to remain where he was before taking the picture, the Lizard would have seen him a mile away.
The perfect angle. Now for the crucial element of surprise.
Let's say even if, hypothetically, this wasn't a beneficial decision for both him and Eddie, and Peter was actually just prioritizing the photo over his friend, I still don't think this is a bad thing for the show. That's how a character grows. I don't want a Spider-Man that is the holy gospel 24/7. I want him to make bad or selfish decisions at times, and learn from his mistakes. It's one of the many things that makes him so relatable. Also, another thing I just realized is that Peter needs to be behind the Lizard in order to kick him into the water.
Not to mention, Peter Parker's name being in the paper would come across as a big fuck you to Connors, because he would be responsible for the humiliating photos being plastered on the news. Not only this, but Peter Parker is someone who regularly works with Connors, so if they know that Peter Parker, someone connected to Connors, was watching this entire fight go down on the same night that the ESU lab faces destruction, while the Lizard has visible clothes on that look just like what Connors wears regularly, while being the only one capable of getting good photos of the Lizard at this specific location, then he risks the police getting a better look at the Lizard and putting 2 and 2 together to realize that this could be connected to Connors. What an absolute dick.
Yes, I agree, and this is what happened to Peter when they found out he took the picture.
But who could have taken these?
Check the byline. Did you see? There's no shots of Billy or Dr. Connors or anything to prove that he was the Lizard.
And that's supposed to... Bro,
You ditched the antidote effort to win a contest.
Eddie, it's all right. Besides, I'm not exactly in a position to throw stones.
Peter, you're young, and faced with difficult choices, young people sometimes make mistakes.
Thanks for understanding.
I understand you, but I can't trust you. You're fired.
The show literally acknowledges that what he did was wrong. I don't understand the issue.
Stab him, stab him, stab him, stab him, stab him, stab him. Why did you let him go? Just pull him closer with your tail and impale him. Stab him, stab him, stab him, stab him. Stop throwing him away when you have him held in place. Just keep him gripped in place and stab him. Stab him, stab him, stab him, stab him, stab him, stab him.
Alright, so I guess we're back to the petty arguments. You want him to stab Spider-Man with what? His claws? He's clearly trying to bite Spider-Man with his teeth, which are far more dangerous. Also, there are limitations with the cartoon. He can't actually stab Spider-Man. You know, I'd love to see this guy's review of the 90s series. Punch him, 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 punch him.
Final scene in this episode is often cited as the pinnacle of Spider-Man, everything a Spider-Man adaptation should strive to be, a scene that understands Spider-Man at his core. And I'm gonna be honest, in context, man, this is some unearned shit. Because the premise of the scene is that Peter gets punished for Spider-Man doing the right thing, even though when we really assess what happened, not only could he have saved the day without facing these consequences, but his dickish behavior was out of character and the wrong thing to do, which this episode doesn't acknowledge well enough. He didn't have to take the pictures or even have his name credited. He could have just requested to remain anonymous for safety reasons, and Jameson would have no qualms with complying with that request. It's even against his character to take the photos, not just because of the sensitivity of the situation, but also because in setting up the camera, he wasn't making sure Eddie was safe when baiting the lizard, when the lizard could have killed Eddie at any moment while Peter was fiddling with the camera, and the added risk of Connors being caught for what he did. And the most we get is Peter being scolded and fired, but the way it's presented in this episode is that he was scrutinized by them because he seemingly ditched the effort to help Connors to win money, and that he still did the right thing, it's just that they didn't know he was Spider-Man. Which instead frames it so the people mad at Peter are mad for ignorant reasons, while this episode does not address the actual wrongdoings on his end. Peter doesn't even reflect on them or realize where he could have done better, and these flimsy reasons for Peter to be in the position that he's in, when he could have easily avoided it, was enough for him to consider drinking the gene cleanser and giving up entirely.
Okay, I see where you're coming from, but I think the argument starts to fall apart when you disagree that Peter setting up the camera was this super dangerous decision. When, if anything, he was already going to go up there and just set up the camera while he was waiting. And also, what do you mean by the worst we get is Peter being scolded and fired? Did you want them to kill him? That's about the worst punishment he could have received. Even in the episode, it isn't presented that anything Peter did was actually dangerous or selfish. He's just getting screwed over by the duality of his life. If you wanted more, I understand, but we can only criticize what we've been provided with. If it was clearly shown how Peter was just focusing on the pictures and almost forgot about Eddie, and then presented it as if it was the duality of his life that's the problem, and nothing to do with his own actions, then I would definitely agree. But I simply don't think there is enough evidence to justify any wrongdoing on Peter's end. Now that's in regards to him endangering Eddie. However, you may also be wondering about Peter almost revealing Connors to be the lizard after publishing the photos on the Daily Bugle. And while it technically isn't wrong for Peter to do this, it's not very considerate, and this is a point I do agree on, and I know that does contradict what I said earlier, but I do find this to be very minor and ultimately inconsequential, since he did leave out any potentially revealing shots. Despite this, Peter still shouldn't have taken the picture, and it probably should have been mentioned in the final scene. Though I get why it wasn't, because the duality of his life is the core of the issue. Being Spider-Man has caused him to make these bad decisions, it's given him the opportunity to make them. So the review of that episode was a lot better. Not necessarily because it made the most correct points, but more due to the points being made having actual substance and weren't just nitpicks of action sequences, for the most part. When talking about the final scene, I do agree that more attention should have been put on Peter being selfish to Connors, but when talking about the point SK makes about Peter endangering Eddie, I think it's fundamentally wrong.
Decent plan thus far. Let's see how this fight goes down. Web his face, web his face, web his face, web his face, web his face.
Arguments like this are so weak, it's almost nauseating. It's like, do this, do that. They're arguments a 5-year-old could make. It's back to CinemaSins level critiquing.
He expects him to be squashed and walks away without confirming the kill. Not the optimal thing to do, but I think his belief this will kill him is within reason, as the enforcers have little reference for how durable Spider-Man is, given how early on this is in his career.
That completely contradicts what he said earlier, but okay.
As a consequence, Peter isn't available to help Harry study for math. Wait, hold up. Let's break down the timeline of events.
Okay, in short, I agree with the point he makes here. There's definitely an inconsistency. It does seem like he would have had the time.
Helping Harry must have really tuckered you out.
I totally blew me off, Pete!
Genius!
Okay, let's break down the timeline of events that led to Peter blowing up Harry for a second time. Spider-Man waited for Flint and Alex to show up near the truck while he was hiding, then webbed them just to tell them he wants a rematch with Shocker. Doesn't sound like a very busy encounter. All he had to do was just web a couple of guys and that's it. Once again, despite having time left over, he decided not to call Harry after leaving Flint and Alex, unless, even worse, he didn't call Harry because it was already too late, even though only a few minutes ago he was in front of the store waiting to buy a new camera with the intention to take photos that night, while not being busy with anything beforehand.
Alright, so you've completely missed the point. The show isn't trying to tell you on either occasion that Peter could not have called Harry. The answer is much simpler than you think. He forgot. I really wish I could understand why he is so against Spider-Man making mistakes. It's a huge part of his character. Almost every single time Spider-Man screws up, in some way it's deemed as a negative for the show. This is an early Spider-Man. You can't critique his actions on the same level you'd critique an 8-year Spider-Man. Spider-Man will always make mistakes that put the life of him and his friends in danger. The web slinger usually finds a way to overcome the odds, but there's a chance that he'll lose someone close to him more often than not. That has always been the Spider-Man story from the start. It's about the consequences he has to face for said mistakes that make the difference between a good Spider-Man story and a bad one. SK seems more in the belief that despite Spider-Man doing all the right things, he still gets punished. And that's an equally important factor, but it's not the only one. At times, Peter Parker is the one responsible for his own problems, and nothing else. It's one of the things I really liked about Spider-Man 3. It showed Peter's imperfections at times. He made mistakes even before the black suit. So you can imagine how annoying it is to constantly hear him criticize the show for Spider-Man making mistakes down to bad writing. And that's not to say that the writing is perfect. The final Shocker fight where he takes down the whole building was definitely way too much. Spider-Man wouldn't do that. But in general, this show does a great job at conveying Spider-Man's mistakes in a mature and realistic manner.
Then we get into episode 5, and our first scene with Peter is seeing him mess around with his webbing in a room where Aunt May could enter at any moment and relies on Aunt May not knowing which way is up if she does enter.
Kind of defeats the whole anonymous superhero thing.
And I guess Aunt May just doesn't have peripheral vision now, which is just excellent.
Ah yes, another example of you looking way too deeply into a 2-minute opening scene designed to make you laugh for a few seconds, before completely forgetting it even exists.
So, side note, you know this scene in Captain America Civil War? It's an overall neat introduction to MCU Peter Parker. I like how from the jump, they understood that Peter shouldn't suddenly and openly gain an interest in taking sports, because that kinda defeats the whole anonymous superhero thing, especially if he uses his powers while playing them.
Yeah, I would love to play football, but I couldn't then, so I shouldn't now.
Sure, because you're different.
But I can't tell anybody that, so I'm not.
So instead of trying to conceal his identity to the best of his ability, which is shown earlier to be where his intentions lie, he openly relies on his powers while playing football at his school, and he even brushed aside his responsibility to go after Sandman to play some more football.
Why do you suppose I just hurled a chair at your head, Neiman?
You're criticizing Spider-Man for making mistakes. Again. I mean, literally, because he chooses to prioritize the football over going for Sandman, this happens. There being consequences for this Peter's actions is what makes this version of him so good. How could you have missed the point they're trying to convey here?
Meanwhile, MCU Spider-Man knows Spider-Man is not a party trick.
No, I cannot do this. Spider-Man is not a party trick, okay?
And immediately left to take care of a threat once he knew of it, and despite not one, not two, but 3 opportunities to spend time with Liz, his mission is prioritized and he goes to take care of his responsibilities. What's that? MCU Spider-Man nailed an aspect of the character that Spectacular Spider-Man completely fumbled? Now that's a take that'll get you into hot water.
Oh, it sure will. Likely because it's WRONG! Alright, so let's break this down, shall we? Both Peter and Spectacular Spider-Man and Homecoming have to put one side of their life on hold because the other demands it. But there is a very key defining difference between both versions that makes Spectacular Spider-Man's good and Homecoming's just kinda meh. You know what that is? Consequences. Almost every time Peter Parker makes a bad decision, a mistake, or is selfish, he receives consequences for his actions in Spectacular Spider-Man. Even when he makes the right decision, his double life has consequences. While with Tom Holland's Peter, consequences are almost completely absent. However, with the exception of one scene, the prom scene, the one and only scene where Tom Holland receives consequences for his double life of any real weight. And this is commonly regarded as one of the better parts of the movie, which I would agree on. The problem is that this is the only time where this huge element of the character feels present. For the remaining 90% of the movie, it feels like he's just drinking the Kool-Aid. The YouTuber Eric Carter sums it up really well.
These MCU Spider-Man movies really need to start making Peter suffer consequences for having to ditch his personal life to become Spider-Man, and these movies are really lacking that. Instead, it just plays these scenes off for jokes. I mean, do you remember this scene from Homecoming?
Guys, Peter? Yeah, I was hoping maybe I could rejoin the team.
No way. You can't just quit on us, stroll up, and be welcomed back by everyone.
Hey, welcome back, Peter. Flash, you're back to first alternate.
See, instead of suffering any consequences for quitting the team, he manages to get back on and takes his original spot back with no problems, when in actuality, the best case scenario for him at this point would be that he gets assigned to a lower rank. Stan Lee said that what makes Spider-Man different from the other superheroes is that he is very relatable. He's a kid that has a normal life which doesn't get put on hold when he suits up as Spider-Man. But that part of Peter Parker's development that Stan Lee incorporated into his character is nowhere to be found with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Everything is easy for him, as when he saves the day as Spider-Man, his personal life is completely intact, and that never fails to disappoint me.
And so when you compare that to Spectacular Spider-Man, well, it's not even comparable. Spectacular Spider-Man schools Homecoming in every aspect of the character. Even the one example you did show, sure Peter's to ditch Liz, but after that 5-second scene where he says he has to go, the movie pretty much just forgets about her entirely. It has no lasting consequences whatsoever. While with Spectacular Spider-Man, not only does he let Sandman rob banks while he's playing football, but he also pushes his friend Harry away further, after already pushing him away by blowing him off twice in the last episode.
You didn't even want to try out.
Yeah, who knew?
This was my dream, Pete. You're already the smartest kid in school. You really need this too?
All because of his mistakes and the duality of his life having consequences. Not to mention that it's this neglectfulness by Peter which pushes Harry towards taking a performance-enhancing drug later in the season.
You seem troubled, son.
Troubled? Gee, you think? I failed my calc test because Pete abandoned me. Flash's crowd won't cut me a break.
Enough. You're parked in a no-whining zone. Take some responsibility. Peter's not the reason you failed. You want to pass a test? Study. You want to be popular? Be popular. Take control of your destiny, boy. Harry, life's pretty simple. You cowboy up and do what you have to do.
Thanks. I will.
Now that's long-lasting consequences for you. And when it comes down to the very core of the point he tries to make, it just doesn't make sense. He's comparing Spider-Man doing the wrong thing and receiving consequences to Spider-Man doing the right thing and receiving consequences, yet saying one is bad when both are perfectly valid. I think this is where I just fundamentally disagree with his view on Spider-Man. And that's okay, no hate to SK, but a Spider-Man who doesn't make mistakes is just not a very interesting one for me. I don't think I'd like his ideal Spider-Man. It's also why I won't be reviewing the remaining 8 episodes. If I can't get behind his view on Spider-Man, then I definitely won't get behind his view on this video. And while it was enjoyable to watch, it's way too nitpicky in my opinion. If you were to cut out all of the nitpicking arguments of things which just don't matter and don't affect the quality of the show, you'd be left with maybe 30 minutes, and that 30 minutes would be a great video, which brings up some interesting points. It's just a shame it's buried beneath so many weak arguments. And if you want my opinion on the show, I think it's definitely a 9 or maybe a 10 out of 10. Yeah, it's not perfect, you clearly can't just nitpick the crap out of it, but it just nails every aspect of Peter's character, as well as having better, smoother animation than most shows today, great villains, maybe the best Spider-Man voice ensemble ever, and just nails so many things. It may be the best Spider-Man cartoon ever made, at least between this and the 90s cartoon, which is almost 30 years old now. But that's all for this video, thanks for watching.
Yoo-hoo! Excuse me, can I come in this way, or do I have to break my own window?
Spider-Man, your timing is impeccable.